a Freudian perspective on strategic withdrawal. Have you ever felt like the more you try to explain yourself, the worse everything gets? Like you're caught in this endless loop, where your words get twisted, your intentions misunderstood, and suddenly you're the problem. Picture this. You're in an argument with someone close to you. They accuse you of something unfair. Your instinct: defend yourself, explain your side, prove you're right. But 20 minutes later, you're somehow apologizing for things you didn't even do, feeling more confused than when you started. Sound familiar? Freud would tell you something that might surprise you. Your silence isn't weakness. It might be the smartest thing your unconscious mind can do. Before we dive deep into why staying quiet can actually save your mental health, make sure to subscribe if you want to understand what's really happening in your mind. Hit that notification bell, because we're about to explore one of Freud's most practical insights that nobody talks about: Freud and the ego under attack. Let's start with the basics. In Freud's model of the mind, your ego is like a diplomat trying to keep peace between three demanding forces: your ID, that primitive part screaming, "I want what I want now"; your superego, your inner critic constantly judging everything you do; and reality, the actual world with all its limitations and other people's needs. Now, imagine your ego is this diplomatic negotiator, and suddenly someone starts attacking you emotionally. Maybe they're gaslighting you, manipulating you, or just being unreasonably aggressive. What happens? Your ego goes into crisis mode. Think of it like your phone. When too many apps are running, it starts to overheat, slow down, and eventually might just shut down to protect itself. That's exactly what your psyche does when it's under emotional attack. Freud called these automatic responses defense mechanisms, and they're not character flaws. They're your mind's built-in security system. The intelligence of silence, understanding psychological withdrawal. Here's where it gets interesting. When you suddenly find yourself going quiet, withdrawing, or just not engaging anymore, Freud would say you're not being weak. You're being strategically intelligent. Let me explain this with what Freud called withdrawal of libido. In psychoanalytic terms, libido isn't just sexual energy, it's your psychological investment, your emotional attention, the mental energy you put into relationships and situations. When you encounter someone who consistently twists your words, invalidates your feelings, makes you question your own reality, responds to your vulnerability. With that, your unconscious mind makes a calculation. This person isn't safe for my emotional investment. So it does something brilliant. It withdraws your libido from that person or situation. You stop trying to connect. You stop explaining. You go quiet. This isn't giving up. This is psychological self-preservation. Think about it like this. If you kept putting money into a slot machine that never paid out, you'd eventually stop, right? Your psyche does the same thing with emotional energy. Silence as a shield against narcissism. Now, here's something Freud understood that we're only now talking about openly. Some people are emotional vampires. In Freudian terms, highly narcissistic individuals have what we call insatiable ego needs. They need constant validation, attention, and control over others' emotional states. When you try to explain yourself to someone like this, you're actually feeding their psychological hunger, your distress, your need to be understood, your emotional reactivity. It all becomes fuel for their ego. But when you go silent, you're no longer feeding the system. It's like this. Imagine someone who thrives on drama suddenly finding themselves talking to a wall. The drama dies. The manipulation loses its power. The emotional game can't continue without your participation. Your silence isn't just protecting you, it's refusing to participate in a psychological dynamic that was never designed to help you feel heard or understood in the first place. When words find nitrogen monoxide real listening. Freud spent his entire career listening to people, really listening, and he discovered something profound. True listening is incredibly rare. Most of the time, when people are listening to you explain yourself, they're actually preparing their counterargument, looking for ammunition to use against you, waiting for you to admit fault, trying to prove they're right. This isn't real listening. This is psychological combat. Your unconscious mind can sense this. It can feel when your words are being weaponized against you instead of truly heard. And when that happens, silence becomes not just reasonable, it becomes necessary to think about. The last time you tried to explain your feelings to someone and walked away feeling worse than before, that's your sign that your words weren't finding fertile ground. They were falling on psychological concrete. The difference between escape and emotional hygiene. This is crucial. Freud would be the first to point out that there's a difference between healthy withdrawal and pathological avoidance. Healthy silence looks like recognizing when engagement is futile, protecting your energy for relationships that actually nourish you, choosing not to participate in destructive dynamics, taking space to process your own feelings. Unhealthy silence looks like never expressing your needs anywhere, shutting down in all relationships, using silence as punishment or manipulation, avoiding all conflict, even necessary ones. The key difference? Conscious choice versus unconscious compulsion. Freud would say, when you're aware that you're choosing silence as protection, that's psychological wisdom. When silence chooses you, and you have no idea why you can't speak up anywhere in your life, that's when you need to dig deeper. Modern examples where strategic silence saves sanity. Let's get practical. Here are some modern situations where your unconscious might be protecting you through silence. The workplace narcissist. You know the colleague or boss who turns every conversation into a performance about how great they are, who takes credit for your ideas and somehow makes you feel grateful for the opportunity. Your sudden reluctance to share ideas isn't career sabotage, it's psychological protection. The manipulative family member, that relative who always has a crisis, always needs something, but somehow every conversation ends with you feeling guilty and drained. Your growing tendency to give shorter answers, to not engage with their drama, that's not you being cold. That's your psyche recognizing an emotional black hole. The gaslighting partner, the person who says they want to understand you, but every explanation you give gets turned into evidence of how unreasonable you are. Your increasing silence isn't communication breakdown. It's your mind refusing to participate in its own destruction. The social media mob. You post something innocuous, and suddenly everyone's an expert on your life, your motivations, your character, your instinct to stop explaining, to step back, to go quiet. That's not cowardice, that's sanity. When silence becomes pathological. But here's where Freud's wisdom really shines. He'd also warn us about when protective silence hardens into something that hurts us. Silence becomes problematic when it spreads everywhere. If you find yourself unable to speak up in a relationship, even safe ones, your defense mechanism might be working overtime. It becomes your only tool. If silence is your only response to all conflict, you might be avoiding necessary growth and intimacy. It builds resentment. If your silence is filled with rage, fantasies of revenge, or growing hatred, it's not protecting you, it's poisoning you. It prevents authentic connection. If you can't be vulnerable even with people who've proven themselves trustworthy, your protection might have become a prison. Freud would say this is when silence has moved from conscious choice to unconscious compulsion, and that's when you need help untangling it. The Freudian solution: conscious choice through understanding. So what would Freud actually recommend at first? He'd say, honor your psychological wisdom. If your unconscious is pulling you towards silence in certain situations, listen to it. Your psyche might be seeing something your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. But second, he'd insist on bringing the unconscious into consciousness. In other words, understand why you're going silent. Ask yourself, what am I protecting myself from? What pattern am I recognizing that my conscious mind might be missing? Is this person or situation actually unsafe for my authentic self? Am I choosing silence? Or is silence choosing me? The goal isn't to never be silent. The goal is to make silence a conscious choice rather than an unconscious compulsion. This is where Freud's talking cure comes in. In therapy, or even in honest self-reflection, you can explore your silence. You can understand it, honor it, and then choose when to maintain it and when to break it. Because here's the thing, when you understand your silence, it becomes a tool instead of a trap. The deeper truth, disappearing is reconstruction. Here's something that might surprise you. Freud believed that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is psychologically disappear from situations and relationships that demand you be someone you're not. He called this withdrawal of libidinal investment, basically taking your emotional energy back from people and places that aren't worthy of it. This isn't about being antisocial or avoiding all human connection. It's about recognizing that your psychic energy is precious, and you have every right to be selective about where you invest it. Sometimes what looks like giving up is actually the beginning of finding yourself again. When you stop trying to explain yourself to people who aren't really listening, you create space to understand yourself better. When you stop reacting to every provocation, you create room for your authentic responses to emerge. When you stop participating in dynamics that diminish you, you start remembering who you actually are when you're not under attack. Practical takeaways, implementing Freudian wisdom. So how do you put this into practice? 1. Trust your psychological instincts. If you feel drained after trying to explain yourself to someone, that's information. Your unconscious might be telling you this isn't a safe space for your authentic self. 2. Distinguish between different types of silence: protective silence, conscious choice; depressive silence, feeling hopeless about being heard; manipulative silence, using withdrawal as punishment; dramatic silence, being triggered to speak. Closing parenthesis. 3. Practice conscious withdrawal. Instead of just going quiet and feeling bad about it, make it intentional. Say to yourself, I'm choosing not to engage right now because this conversation isn't productive for either of us. 4. Create safe spaces for your voice. Just because you choose silence in toxic situations doesn't mean you should be silent everywhere. Find relationships, therapy, or creative outlets where your authentic voice is welcome. 5. Investigate your patterns. If you notice you're going silent in multiple relationships, that's worth exploring. Are you protecting yourself from genuine threats, or are you avoiding all vulnerability? The revolutionary act of strategic silence. Here's what Freud really understood. In a world that often demands you explain yourself, justify your existence, and prove your worth to people who aren't actually interested in understanding you, silence can be revolutionary. Not the silence of shame or defeat, but the silence of self-respect. The silence that says, I don't need to convince you of my worth. I don't need to participate in conversations designed to diminish me. I don't need to explain myself to people who've already decided who I am. This kind of silence isn't about shutting down. It's about powering up. It's about recognizing that your energy, your words, your emotional investment are gifts, not obligations. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep those gifts for people and situations that actually deserve them. Your unconscious mind might already be trying to protect you through strategic silence. Maybe it's time to listen to what it's trying to tell you. Remember, you don't owe anyone your emotional energy. You don't owe anyone an explanation that they're not genuinely seeking to understand. And you certainly don't owe anyone participation in your own psychological destruction. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do for yourself and others is to simply stop talking and start listening to what your silence is trying to teach you. What do you think? Have you ever experienced the power of strategic silence? Have you noticed your unconscious mind protecting you by pulling back from certain people or situations? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And your experiences help other people feel less alone in their psychological journeys. And if this resonated with you, subscribe for more practical, fruity, and insights that you can actually use in your daily life. Because understanding your mind isn't just academic, it's the key to living with more intention, less reactivity, and genuine self-respect.